Hi, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to try and make a chicken pot pie. This is what it looks like so far. These are the ingredients. I'm not through. I have it on really low and I have the oven heating. I'm going to bake this at 375 and I'm going to put all my ingredients together before I put them inside the pie crust. So if you haven't done so already, please hit the like and the subscribe button, and also you can hit the notification bell if you want to see when I post a new video. So I've tried this before with not really good results, and I at that time I tried to make the broth, if you will, from scratch, and it didn't turn out so well. So here I am years later. I'm going to try it again, and this is like an almost homemade kind of thing, sort of. So what I have is I got the frozen vegetables because I don't want to, the canned vegetables will taste like metal and I don't want that. So I got the frozen vegetables, and I don't think it matters. It's just I grabbed 2 of these and they were 12 ounce. I think I may only need 1 of them, but when you make stuff yourself, you can add extra to it. So I have pie crust that's already pre-made, and this was Pillsbury. That's all they had, and it is the pie crust already in the shell, the pie crust already in the pan, and lucky for me, it was the deep dish pie crust, and I think that will work much better. So this is made from the precept of when I've seen our elders make soup, and they generally use all the leftover stuff. So I have some chicken that was already cooked, and it was extra. It was frozen, so I just hit the defrost on there. I have 2 pie crusts. I have a bag of frozen mixed vegetables, and I used 2 cans of cream of chicken soup. Yes, some of these are name brand, but I guess the other stuff will work too. But that's all that they had on hand, and I didn't want to go searching from store to store. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop the chicken up. All right, so I've chopped that up. That was chicken breast. You can use any type chicken that you like. The one reason why I like using leftover, instead of throwing away the food, just put it in the freezer, and I generally do that and use it for a soup. So it's not quite cold enough for soup yet, but I'm going to do a pot pie and see how that works. So I'm just going to add this to my mixture, like so. And this is a lot, but I really love pot pies, and the problem is when you get them, they don't have that much chicken in them. Either way, I generally don't eat the chicken because it seems like it's rubbery or artificial or something. So I generally just pick the chicken out. And I like all the other stuffing, and I love the crust. So I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to bring it up to temperature. And while it's coming up to a temperature that I would like, we usually do this from frozen. I'm going to go ahead and do my pie crust. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to do it like you normally do for a pie. Poke a few holes in this bottom, and you may think, that's going to leak out, but I do believe these holes tend to close up after the pie shell has baked quite a bit. So I'm going to poke holes in that one, but not the other one, and I'm going to use this to cover this with it, but I'm going to cover my edges here, and then I'm going to put it in here so I can bake some of this. One thing I don't like about the pot pie, when I get to the bottom of it, sometimes it seems like the dough is still, the pie crust is still a little doughy. So I'm going to cover the edges, and I'll be right back. All right, so I have a, what is it, like strips. I took strips of aluminum foil and covered the outside edges because I don't want those to cook yet. They will cook in due time. I don't want them to cook yet. I want them to remain like they are, and I'm going to put that in there and cook that for about 10 minutes. And while that's cooking for its 10 minutes, let me set a timer. Okay, so I changed my mind. I'm just going to let it do 7 minutes. And while it's doing that, I'm just going to stir this up. This is super salty, I do believe. This is just straight soup. Tastes okay. I added a lot of extra seasoning, no salt. The soups are full of sodium anyway, so I did not add any salt, but I added a lot of other seasonings. And I'm going to bring this up to a good little temperature while the pie crust is doing what it's doing. Turn the light on so I can just peep in there without opening up the door and letting out all the heat. Now, I must tell you one reason for me bringing this up to temp. Two reasons, really. One reason so that it's already up to temp and it won't take long to cook. The other reason is the vegetables were frozen. Remember, they were frozen, so they have quite a bit of water in them, or liquid in them, and I want that to come out and mix with the soup. So I want to try not to add any extra water. I don't want it too watery. I want the inside nice and thick. But I want the vegetables to be thawed somewhat, and really it'll probably act like an apple pie. I really, you don't have to do all that to it. So we'll see how it works. I'm just busying myself while the inside of the pie crust bakes some. All right, so this is pretty hot. I got the steam coming off of it, and it's still super thick. See how thick that is? And normally the filler is not that thick, so I have a 1/4 cup of water here. And I'm not adding it all at once, but I'm going to see if a 1/4 cup of water gives me the consistency that I like in my pot pie. We don't want it too thick, but we don't want it too loose. That heat is super hot. And I have a short spoon. I don't do like I do. I just like being close to my food when I'm cooking it. And that's why I don't have a long handle. That's almost it. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of that. I only added like half of that. So that's only a 1/4 cup of water that I added to it. I used 2 cans of the soup. And I'm stirring it, and it feels pretty good. Because remember, when it gets hot, when you get into that pot pie, it's so delicious. But it's, the filling is loose. It's not super stiff like that was just then. I probably could get away with doing a 1/3 cup of water. So you need it to be the right consistency. Okay, so I'm pleased with that. The inside of this was puffed up, which was fine, and I just poked a few holes in it. That way, I'm going to touch it. Okay, so it's not wet to the touch, which is nice. I'm going to remove the aluminum foil from the outside. Yeah, see that little bubble there? So I didn't want, so the outside of the shell, the walls of the shell bubbled some, which is fine. It's not cooked all the way through, but at least it's partially cooked, and I won't have that raw dough on the bottom. And of course, I can cook it slower and just longer, and it should cook through and through. The pie crust, that is, should cook through and through. So now I'm going to, let's put the filling in here. I don't like drippings all down the side of the pot, sorry. So that's more than enough to fill up this deep dish pie crust. And I still have some left over. So that's nicely done there. And I have a really nice amount of chicken and vegetables in there. And there's a lot left over. So I can make soup out of that. It's enough to fill this one pie crust up. And now all I'm going to do is place the other pie crust. I probably shouldn't have had it this full, because it's going to bubble up some. So I probably should take some of this out. I don't want to overfill it. Give it some room to move. Now what I'm going to do now is gently remove this pie shell, place it on top here, and then press these edges together for the two pie crusts. What you must remember now is to handle this gently and use it at room temperature. So usually you can, you take the pie crust out and it's frozen. I take the pie crust out. It remains frozen until I use it. But for this, I pulled it to room temperature first. And I'm just removing the pie crust off the edges. And I ripped it there, so let me use two hands. So one hand working with pie crust is not how you're supposed to do it. But what you do is you fold the pie crust in half. And then you lay it on top. And then you can unfold it, usually using two hands, and it will stay together. I'm going to have to do some patchwork because I'm using one hand. All right, so here we are. And I must tell you, 7-minute cook time for the pie shell was a little too much because it started cooking the outer edges. I didn't realize that it was drying out the outer edges some, and you don't want that to happen. So maybe 5 minutes would have been fine just for the inside of that pie shell. As you can see, it's all wrinkled, so it was extra pie. There was going to be extra pie shell because of the deep dish portion of it, but I didn't want to put it on. You can put it on a surface and re-roll it out. I don't want a chance making the dough tough. And of course, I want it to look like it's homemade. So, for some reason, they don't want it to look picture perfect when you say it's homemade. And therefore, all this crust in here, I could have just worked it back into itself, and I didn't. And that's fine how it is. And I do need to, however, poke a few holes in this. And you want to poke holes in it so that the air can escape. You don't want it to bubble up, and it will bubble up. So just a few holes here and there, and now into the oven it goes. And I'm not sure how long it should stay in there, so I'm going to give it, oops, 1 moment. We must cover the edges. All right, so normally we let a pie bake, depends on if the stuff is frozen and how much is in there. So I'm going to give this 20 minutes, and then I'll come back and peep at it. You know I'm going to peep at it before 20 minutes are up. Okay. All right, it's done. I don't want a chance of burning it. It's just starting to lightly brown the top crust. And as you can see, it was overfilled, so you see how some of it ran out on the pan and on the foil, but that's fine. So all I need to do now is let it cool off some and then dive into it. But that's what it looks like. When it cools off, I'll be able to show you the inside. So here's the dilemma. I never did a pot pie like this. So I'm going to, I guess, use the spoon and scoop it out. I want to make sure I get some of the bottom. It's soupy. I really don't know how to do this. Okay, here it is. I scooped it out with a spoon. It's still super hot, and I'm getting ready to taste it. Okay, so the fight is on. I have a taste tester over here saying he wants his last little bit, which this came from the other side. But I was told the filling is really good and tasty, so I'm going to taste it now. It's still really, really hot. Oh, my. You must try this. It is the right amount of everything, and it is delicious. Oh my. I may have to, I don't know if everyone likes pot pie like I do, but I may think about putting this during the holidays. Mmm. Mmm. Juicy. Everything tastes nicely. The seasoning has incorporated in everything, and I think because I did leftovers, it had seasoning in it. Each thing had seasoning in it itself, and I added it all together. The crust is flaky. This has got to be one of the better pot pies that I've had, and I've purchased them from like 3 different restaurants, and they were horrible. So this far exceeds my expectations. Hopefully you try this yourself, and let me know in the comment section how you like it. All right. So if you haven't done so already, hit the like and the subscribe button. Thanks for joining me.